Hi, my name is Kristin and this is Kristin Kraves Books. So this is the beginning of my wrap-up monthly vlog. Hopefully I stick to it this time. Hopefully I don't lose footage. Hopefully I don't burn out. I can already feel the burnout from Ramathon, but we're sticking to it. I don't think I will read nearly as many books as I did last month, and that is okay. I've been listening to a lot of music lately, so I have just not been focusing on audiobooks as much, but I do have 2 books to talk about. The first one is Grave Briar by Casey Bond, and this was the book for the Black Hat Book Coven. It was actually my pick, so we discussed the book on my channel. I will leave a link to that down below. Mixed feelings, mixed feelings. This is a YA fantasy romance, and there was a lot to love and a lot to not really love, and we really get into it in the discussion. But this is billed as for fans of Kraves, so I think you go into this one expecting a really big circus setting, and while part of the circus was cool, it's a very small part of the book. We don't get as much detail as I would like, and I think there's some missed opportunities when it comes to the world in this one. And also, we talked about this in the chat, but the names of the characters are too much. There are different covens within this world, and our main character is supposed to be a green witch. That's the coven she's part of, but her family's keeping her magic a secret, just pretending she hasn't come into it yet, because she's actually a poison witch, and she's very, very powerful. And her love interest is named Forge, and he's part of a coven that like makes weapons, forges weapons, so that makes a lot of sense, I suppose. And the 2 of them end up on this quest. I won't go into too much detail, but over the course of the quest they fall in love, but it happens like this. I think the whole story is told in like 2 days, or they fall in love within 2 days, so insta love is happening. But she does have a pet frog named Bog, who I loved and actually made me cry, so I liked that part of it. There's some interesting reveals actually in the story, and there were moments where I loved the banter, moments where it was cringy. I just wish it was more slow burn. That is just my preference, and a lot of it kind of wraps up with in a neat bow by the end. But the writing at the beginning was so excellent. It was so descriptive. You could really feel like you were immersed in the story, and you could picture all of the covens and the outfits that they were wearing, because it starts at a ball, and then you really want that description, that kind of writing to continue on throughout the rest of the story, and we just don't get it. Why didn't we get that amount of detail about the circus? I would have lived for it. I think that this could have been a series or a longer book. I just think it was a missed opportunity. But I would be interested to try something else by this author, because I think that her writing is actually good when it's good, and I like her ideas. So if you have read anything else by Casey Bond and you have recommendations, let me know, because I think she has a pretty extensive backlist. And then the other book that I read was actually Tales of the Celestial Kingdom by Sue Lin Tan, illustrated by one of my favorite illustrators, Callie Chong. This is obviously very short, and it is a series of short stories that you read after you read the first 2 books, and you definitely have to save it for after, because there's a lot of spoilers in the middle. And something that I absolutely loved and didn't realize when I bought this book is that, where's the author's note in here? It says, all my personal proceeds from Tales of the Celestial Kingdom will be donated to charity, and I hope in this way we'll be able to give something back. Thank you for your support of my stories and for the chance to share them, which I just thought was really sweet and brilliant. So you could tell that this was a passion for her, and she wasn't done telling the story of this world and these characters, and I could feel that when I read the first 2. I love that duology. I understand why it doesn't work for everybody, but it just really works for me, and I knew there was more story to tell in that world. And again, I could have even used more, because obviously this is very short, but I did appreciate what we got. So the first couple of stories are following the main character from the original duology, her parents and their story, and what led up to the moment that the series started. And I thought that that was really interesting, and we got hints of what happened, but it was nice to get the full story and see their love story and all that kind of stuff. And then the middle stories are from the perspective of characters from the original books, which I thought was fun, and it was just nice to get more detail and to see what other characters were doing and thinking during those moments. And then the final story is a sequel, and if you read the end of book 2, you might not have been satisfied. I could see why people wouldn't love that ending, and I think that this book gives you some more closure that maybe you were seeking, and I appreciated that a lot. But I just love the illustrations in this. Let me find one. They're just gorgeous, and they really add to it. I do kind of wish they were in color, but I understand why they aren't. Look at these. I love it so much. So you definitely have to be a diehard fan of the first 2 books to appreciate this one, and I don't think you'd pick it up otherwise. If you were just meh on the first two, I don't think you're gonna be interested in this in the first place, but I obviously was. I do kind of hate that it's hardcover. My other two are paperback, but I will get over it. And yeah, I'm not mad at all about this, about the existence of this. Sometimes I am iffy about like novellas or short stories within an entire series, but I'm coming around to them, and I really appreciated this one, and it did give me some of the closure and answers that I needed. And I just think the world that Sue Lin-Tan has created is immaculate and so beautiful and so descriptive, and I just love everything about it. So it was nice to be back in that world, even if it was just for a moment, because I read this in one night. So I'm in the middle of a few things, and it's just one of those things where I'm trying a bunch of things to see what sticks, because I'm not sure what I'm in the mood for, or maybe I'm just not in the mood to read it all. But I'm just trying to go with mood. Even though I have my TBR, I'm just trying to embrace the fact that either I just read what I want to pick up, or I'm not going to read at all. And I'm trying to avoid a slump desperately. So we will see. Hopefully I will have more updates for you soon. I have 3 books to talk about, and 2 of them are 5 stars, and one of them is a 3 and a pretty big disappointment, but we'll talk about that one last. The first one is a 2024 release. Actually, both of my 5 stars are 2024 releases, and oh, I just love them so much. The first one I need a physical copy of because I need to annotate, I need to gush about it. I listened to the audiobook from NetGalley, so I probably missed some details, and I want to absorb everything. It's Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Winswell. I feel like I was talking about this so often because I was comparing the covers. It was in my most anticipated releases videos, I think twice. So I am so happy that I finally read it, and it lived up to my expectations. It actually blew them out of the water. I think that this is so unique. It's its own genre. It's its own thing. Never read anything like it. Our main character, Sheshin, I adore, and she is a shapeshifter, and it's pretty gruesome. It goes into details about, I guess, her victims, but it's more like her prey because she eats humans to survive. And yeah, it doesn't hold back in the details of that, but I kind of loved it. And it's actually a romance. So you have this gruesomeness going on, this unique world building. Sheshin is being hunted, so you have that in the backdrop of this, while also having this really sweet, adorable sapphic romance that I ate up. So I know when I was talking about the US versus UK covers for this book, I said that I love them both, but I was curious to read this book to see which one fits better. They both work. They both fit. It's shocking. So it just is a matter of what inspired the cover designer, because on the one side you have this shapeshifter who is killing people, and you get some of that on the US cover, and then on the other side you get this really sweet, like almost cozy fantasy something romance. So that's the UK cover. They both work. I kind of want them both, but they're expensive, so I'm actually waiting for the paperback release, I think, and then enough time will have passed so I can reread it. I think what's really great about this too is that because you also have some of the more horrifying scenes, you also have a really great sense of humor that takes place throughout the entire story, so you can kind of laugh at some of those moments. Basically, Sheshin is like just a big blob that can shift into whatever they want. And there's also a bear in this that's blue. Love that, named Blueberry. Clever. And I just think there's so many great elements to the world in this. There's so much potential for more in this world as well. But really there's a plot. Obviously it's about her trying to survive the townspeople, but it's a love story. That's what this is. It's a love story. So it's a monster romance. Could we call it that? A very, very, very unique one. Not your typical monster romance, but I think it could work for fans of that genre. I adored it so much. I can't wait to reread it. I just think it's fantastic. I can't believe it's a debut. Loved the writing. I actually read an AMA on Reddit with the author, and I loved everything that the author had to say about the book. So maybe I'll link that down below so you can get some insights as well. But I think I would read the book first and then check that out, and I highly, highly recommend reading the book. Obviously I adored it. And then this next one I don't think will be a surprise for anybody, because typically I adore Abby Jimenez. Yours truly is a different story. I was a little bit reluctant to pick up her new book, but I had to, and it's just for the summer. 5 stars. It made me so happy that I think Yours truly was just a one-off for me. Some of the decisions that she made didn't work for me, but in this one it all came full circle, and I loved it, and it just made me so happy. And it's something that it's hard to talk about, which is weird for a romance. I don't want to say too much. How do I even get into this one? I don't want to spoil anything. I just think if you're already a fan of hers, you have to read it, period. It's a great romance. Daniel from Part of Your World is probably still my favorite of her heroes, but Justin is up there. I think he's so sweet, And I wasn't sure about the setup of this one, of like the curse, but that really isn't what this is about. It's how they meet. So they have like a sweet meet cute on Reddit, because Justin posts in the subreddit Am I the Asshole? I'm sure you've seen that subreddit going around, and he talks about this scenario where he named this like really ugly dog that he has. It's ugly in a cute way, but he named it after his best friend because his best friend kind of left him high and dry. And so he wrote this whole thing out, said am I the asshole? And he talks about how he has this curse where whenever he breaks up with somebody, that person meets their soulmate right away. Then our heroine Emma comes across this post because it goes viral, and she has the same curse. So they start talking through DMs, I guess, on Reddit, and both of them have complicated relationships with their mothers. So if that is you and it's not something you want to read about, I wouldn't pick this one up, especially when it comes to Emma. She has a very toxic mother who's taking advantage of her and shows up again in the story, and I thought that was so well done. And there's some really interesting conversations and really interesting reveals. I'm not going to say anything more than that. And then Justin ends up in a situation where he's getting custody of his younger siblings. So they have a lot going on, but they have a deep attraction for one another. They think that if they pretend to date, they fake date, and then they break up, they'll find their soulmates, the curse will be broken, but I wonder how that all turns out for them. And Emma also has her best friend in here as a character I really liked. I just think that this was kind of fantastic. I don't think I loved it as much as A Part of Your World, but it's up there. It's definitely my second favorite from hers. I'm so excited to see what she does next. And yeah, if you love her at all, you just have to read this. Don't listen to too many reviews. Don't look into too many spoilers. Just be surprised like I was. And then I read The Inadequate Heir by Daniel L. Jensen. 3 stars, but I was hoping it would be 4 or 5. Because if you watch my wrap up from last month, I read 3 books by her. The first 2 books in the Bridge Kingdom series being 2 of them, and gave both of those 5 stars. I love them so much. Now, this new book, The Inadequate Heir, is the first book in a duology within the bigger series of the Bridge Kingdom, so I think that this is just personal taste. Comes down to the couple, the tropes you like. I definitely preferred the first couple, maybe because they were more slow burn, and maybe because it was set up and we were learning about the world. This third book felt more insta-love to me, and just the way that it was told within the plot of the first 2 books, I feel like I already knew a lot of what was coming just because we're seeing a different perspective, but you still knew how all this was going to play out, so I wasn't as invested. There wasn't as much tension for me. I don't know, I just didn't feel as into the characters. I think it might just be a tropes thing as well. I will still read the 4th book, and hopefully that one connects a little bit more, because I think a 5th one comes out this year, and that's following a different couple, so I don't want to be left behind. I still want to know what happens, but I just don't think that this one moved the plot as much for me as much as I would have liked. And it's funny because I would say they're both enemies to lovers, like the first duology, and this one technically, I guess maybe this one's more rivals to lovers because they are on different sides, just like in the first book, but they didn't have the banter that I was expecting as much. Like, they fall for each other right away. It becomes steamier way sooner than it did in the first duology, and again, it's that running parallel to the first 2 books. We're just getting a different POV. You're getting to see some of the events and how they unfolded from a different perspective in a different place in the world. But again, the stakes weren't as high because I knew how this all played out. Following the heroine from the first 2 books, her brother, who I think is an interesting character. I do think that learning more of his motivations was intriguing, and his thoughts about his sister and some of the decisions she made. So I do kind of love that. I never fully sank into it. Wasn't like squealing, wasn't kicking my legs, none of that stuff. So it just didn't hit for me, that's all I can say. But I will read the 4th one eventually. I thought I would read it right away, but I needed a break from it. So I have started something else, which I will talk to you about in the next clip. I have 3 books to talk to you about today. One that really surprised me, I really liked. It's a contemporary romance. I think that's just part of the problem, is that's what I'm in the mood for this month, and I just have to go along with it. It's just my mood's been all over the place. I don't know what's going on with my reading in April, but then the other 2 were quite disappointing, so that is upsetting. I hope that was not the trajectory for the rest of the month, but let's start off with the win. Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. You probably have seen this if you're on Bookstagram, I feel like. It had a moment where it was everywhere, and I don't blame people on Bookstagram because I love this cover and it's like so photogenic. Of course, you want to take pictures of it. And I just felt like this felt like spring, and it was springy in a way, but it's just a contemporary romance. And as you can probably tell on the cover, the main character is pregnant, and it is a surprise pregnancy. She has a one-night stand. Later, she finds out she's pregnant, but she ends up having a romance with her best friend's brother. Now, just like a lot of other people, I am not a fan of the surprise pregnancy trope at all, but because we as a reader go into this knowing that that is what we're getting in here, we're informed, it doesn't feel like a surprise to us. And it's how the story starts. It's not like a third act conflict. It doesn't come at the end. That's what the story is. She's pregnant throughout the entire book, and we're learning about her journey with that. And there's no real jerks in here. Like, the father is not really a jerk. He's not perfect. He doesn't respond in the perfect way, and his life is a little complicated, but nobody's a real a-hole. So I appreciated that. It wasn't that kind of thing. And there are conversations about infertility because her best friend is married and has been struggling to have a baby, so she has complicated feelings about her friend's pregnancy, and that's kind of talked about. So if that's something that's difficult for you, just know that that is explored in this book. The romance is just really sweet. You see how Shep, the best friend's brother, really supports her through her pregnancy, is excited for her, wants to be there for her, does little things to help her, and it's really cute. You see her announcing her pregnancy to her family. She is the youngest in a family of brothers, and her parents had her when they were a lot older, so she was a surprise herself. So I just thought it was really sweet. It's set in New York. Like, New York in the springtime is kind of the feeling you get from this, but of course you're following her throughout her pregnancy, so you see different times in New York and Christmas and things like that. I don't know, I just thought that this was kind of delightful. And while it explores some heavier conversations like infertility, it was just a joy to read. And while it is a romance, there's also a lot of growth in Eve as a person, and I just really was impressed by this. I would read something else by Kraves. I don't know if she has anything else. I think she might have like some originals on Audible or something, but I'm not sure if she has a full-length novel. And the tagline says, "Love shows up when you least expect it." So I could see this being made into a movie. It was just a sweet romance, exactly what I needed in the moment. Then I read The House Witch for the Black Hat Book Club, and I read some other things in the same time, but this one took me 2.5 weeks, 2 weeks, something like that, and that is unheard of for me. This is under 500 pages, I believe, but it felt like it went on for 1,000. The pacing was so off for me, and in theory I should love this because it is a cozy fantasy and it has witches, two of my favorite things. You put those together, ideally I would love it, and it's such a popular cozy fantasy that I went into it expecting it would be one of my favorite things, but it just didn't work for me. And I'm so curious to see what the other members of the book club thought about it. I have a feeling they might have liked it a bit more than me. We haven't had the discussion yet, but we will have it at the end of the month. And by the time you see this video, that will have been done, so I will leave a link to that discussion. I'm really excited to get into the nitty-gritty of this book. But we're following a character named Finn, and he's a house witch, and he's like the chef in a royal household. And we see all of the dynamics of him with the king and queen themselves, the prince, some knights, some other characters as well. There is a romance, but it's almost too slow burn for my liking, and I wouldn't go into this book for the romance in the slightest. That's not what this is, and I almost struggle to call it cozy. While it does feel cozy, there are some of the typical cozy fantasy tropes, like the cooking, the food descriptions, all those things that I love in a cozy. It talks about infertility, miscarriage, domestic violence. We get some flashbacks, scenes of that. Not in a graphic way or gruesome way, but they are explored in it and they are talked about. So I think a lot of people, myself included, turn to a cozy for escapism, thinking you're not going to come across topics like that. So if those are difficult topics for you to read about, or you're just not in the headspace to read a cozy that has those, just know going in that they are mentioned and they do happen. So that was a bit of a surprise for me. Not that it was handled poorly or anything like that, at least I didn't think so, but it was just a bit shocking. And I just don't really know what happened in this book. There's a lot of POVs. Obviously my favorite was Kraken the cat. Loved him so much. But if you put a cat, you name it something silly, and you give him a perspective, I'm gonna love him. So that was a highlight for me, obviously, as I have a cat in my legs. And I thought it was interesting to have so many POVs, and actually my least favorite POV was Finn himself. I just thought he was a flat character, and I think humor, again, this is like a humorous cozy fantasy, I think is what they call it, and humor for me, there's a specific kind of humor that I like in books, and this wasn't it I don't know how else to explain it except it's boy humor. It's about getting Finn and a bunch of knights, a bunch of boys together, and they make boy jokes. That's just how it felt to me, and I could see why people would think it's funny because, like, it is funny, some of the jokes. They just don't land for me, but I could see somebody reading it and laughing out loud, but just not my kind of humor. And honestly, the reason that I think it's a 2.5 stars for me was just because it was a slog. It felt so long. So long. So I won't be continuing on with this series. And I think it's funny that the second and third books are just called House Witch 2, House Witch 3. That's just funny to me that those are the titles of the sequels, but I'll be curious to see if anybody else in the book club continues, and I'll get their perspective on what's happening, because I think maybe we're setting up for some interesting things. And I know that the second book is quite a bit shorter than the first, so I'm open to it if they think I will like it, but for right now, not my favorite. And then I listened to an ALC from Libro FM of Happily Never After by Lynn Painter, so shout out to Libro FM for this. I really did like Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter, but then I DNF'd a few other things from her, so I'm not sure if she's an author for me. That just might be the case. You know how there's authors, especially in romance for me, there's some who are tried and true, who I know I'm always gonna love, and then some that I want to love, I love their ideas, but something about the execution doesn't work. I think that might be Lynn Painter for me, with that one exception. This started out so good. I was having so much fun with this. I loved the premise. So follows Sophie and Max, and Sophie at the beginning of the book is getting married, but she finds out that her fiance is cheating on her, so through some connections she hires this guy named Max who objects at weddings. So at her wedding he gets up and says, you've been having an affair, blah blah blah, pretending to be somebody who's friends with the affair partner or something, and the wedding is called off. And this is something he does quite a bit because there's different reasons why different people can't call off the wedding themselves, and that's all really explained in the book. And then he and Sophie, after the wedding's called off, he goes up to get payment or whatever, and they end up having a night where they just drink and talk. And during that conversation she says that this is something she'd want to do, but then he leaves, they don't talk for a while, and then there is a wedding that he can't call off himself, so he calls her up, asks her to do this, yada yada yada. They go through all of these wedding objections, and through the course of it they start to have feelings for one another. But I think that they got together too early. That's something that always bothers me. It wasn't slow burn enough. I know I said in the House Witch it was too slow burn. This one wasn't slow burn enough. I'm picky apparently when it comes to my slow burn, but I just thought that they started hooking up too soon for me. And then it becomes a conversations about, oh well, we're hooking up, but what does that mean? We kissed, but it doesn't mean anything. We slept together, but it doesn't mean anything. We're never gonna do that again. And it just got annoying because obviously Sophie now, she doesn't believe in love. Her fiance kind of ruined her trust, makes sense, but you love this guy. Let's not deny your chemistry. Stop fighting it. I find that so frustrating. So I think the second half really lost me. The first half was so good. I wish we actually got more of the scenes of them at weddings. If they only did a couple, I would have loved a million of them. I thought that was such a fun concept. Another one that I think would make for such a good like Netflix rom-com or something because it's hilarious, but I just wish the tension was built up a bit more. I wasn't swooning for them. Their banter kind of got lost because they were so in their feelings and fighting the chemistry. So in the end, not a favorite, disappointing, kind of a waste of a really unique concept. But I do think the concept was absolutely genius, and I love that about it, but not my favorite execution. So finally, kind of bummers. Now I need to move on to something hopefully that ends up being a 4 or 5 star for me. That's what I need. Okay, I was just getting ready to edit this video and I realized I have 3 books I haven't talked about. Par for the course, but one I really loved, a new author I want to explore. One was a 2-star, my worst book of the month, from an author who I've loved in the past, so that is sad. And the other is from an author who I love, and I'm conflicted about this book. So let's just start off with something happy. The one that I really loved is called Out of Office by H. Cunningham, and this really confirmed to me that I just love vacation romances. Holiday romances. They just hit for me. I don't know what it is. I feel like it's believable that people would get swept up in a story like that, or a romance, while you're really relaxed on vacation somewhere nice and warm. It just works for me, it makes sense for me. And in this case, our main character is a workaholic. She is working on opening a hotel in Panama. That is part of her job, and she's just overworked, she's stressed, she never takes a vacation. There's a lot of pressure from her mother actually, but she decides that while she's in Panama, she's gonna take 2 weeks off and just go to an Airbnb somewhere and relax. But this entire time while she was over there working, she had chemistry with her driver, and he invites her to come to their family's hostel for the 2 weeks, and she wants to be spontaneous, do something different, and she goes for it. They both have interesting backstories, as these characters tend to do in these romances that really work for me, so we get some of that. I do wish that we got more time in Panama. We jump a lot of time throughout this book, so we see the 2 weeks together, really romantic, hot and steamy, really saw their chemistry and connection, and then we see them split up and be apart and try and work on long distance. Do they even try to do long distance? How do we make a relationship like this work? Can you take a holiday romance into the real world? So obviously I thought that was interesting. That is unique. It is something you think about. I'm sure a lot of people have had like holiday flings and they just ended there, but they had a deep respect and love for each other that grew over that time, so they wanted to see if it can blossom into something more, while also having pressures from family and their own ideas of what they want from life, because she is a workaholic. She wants to be a successful career woman, while he has a past where he was very into work and that was his main focus, and something happened where his entire worldview switched, so they conflict in that. When we see some of like their daily lives, how a relationship like this could possibly work or not work, and I listened to it in the afternoon. I thought it was really great and really authentic, and I think that this author actually writes steamier books than this one, because I think this might be her first traditionally published romance. I could be wrong on that, but I think that there's some books from her on Kindle, and I know the covers well, so I think that this one is less steamy than you might expect if you are familiar with this author, but don't quote me on that. But I definitely want to explore her backlist at some point. But I need all the vacation romance recommendations, give them to me. Now let's just get this over with. We'll talk about my 2-star, my most disappointing book of the month, maybe the year. This month I've had some 2 stars. I don't know what's happening, but this is Murder Road by Simone St. James. I know I'm not the only one with this opinion. I've seen some book clubs do this book and not love it and things like that. And Simone St. James wrote The Sundown Hotel and The Broken Girls, 2 of my favorite thrillers that have supernatural elements. I love those 2 books so much, so I was really excited about this one. I loved the idea of this couple being on their honeymoon. They get lost on this highway. They pick up a hitchhiker and they notice that she's bleeding, take her to the hospital. She dies, and the cops in that area suspect that they did it because there have been murders on this highway for years and they've never had any suspects, so why not put it on this couple? And I wish we spent more time on the highway. I wish that we had the paranormal, supernatural elements at the forefront of this. I wish that the suspicion on the couple actually lasted longer, because around 50% this changes and they're more investigators than they are suspects, and it lost some of the tension for me. The reveals were kind of ridiculous. There were things that I saw coming from a mile away, and then there were things that I just thought were silly, and not in a campy way, just in a ridiculous way. So I also didn't love the writing, didn't love the characters. I thought they were kind of flat. I wasn't invested in this couple and their relationship, and in a lot of ways that was at the forefront of this, of their new marriage, and she has some secrets that she's hiding, but it made so much sense. Like, I knew what her past was very early on, so reveals of that weren't surprising. Yeah, just not my favorite Simone St. James. I think something that I realized too is that of the 3 books I've read from her, this is the only one that doesn't have the two timelines, which is something that I like. I like that in her other 2 books we had the history, the past timeline, and then we have somebody in the present. We could have easily done that, followed a character who was murdered in the 80s and gotten their perspective to add some tension, to add to the creepiness of this, to add to the supernatural, because to just be following this couple in the present, well, it's not present, it's the 90s, because we have to explain why there's no cell phones and all those kind of things, and why they're using a map to navigate instead of a GPS in their car, so you have to make it in the 90s. I wish we felt more of the 90s nostalgia, actually, and yeah, in no way did this really work for me, so I'm kind of sad about that one. Actually, the Gabby's book club did a live discussion of this one with Gavin and Katie as well. I will leave that link down below if you want a full discussion on this one, because I agreed with so many of their points. And then the one I have complicated feelings about, Block Shot by Kennedy Ryan. You know my love of Kennedy Ryan. She's one of my favorite romance authors. I always think she handles difficult topics in a real authentic way. Her characters are flawed, but in this case, they're too flawed for me. Not even Kennedy Ryan can make me love the cheating trope. I just can't get my head around it. I can't embrace it. I was not cheering for this couple at all, especially because the guy she's in a relationship with is such a nice guy. So I just had such a hard time with it. I couldn't understand why she would throw away her relationship for this guy that she met in college, who was kind of a jerk, and he's like one of these possessive guys. That's just not my thing. You know this by now. I'm a cinnamon roll kind of girl. Give me a cinnamon roll, a simp, he falls first kind of thing over this kind of guy any day. And he did fall for her. He was really into her in college and held on to that through all the years, but not in a sweet way, in like a possessive way, and I couldn't get behind it. I'm sorry, I just couldn't. I understood that in her current relationship, they were best friends more than they were lovers, but the guy was in love with her, and it broke my heart. I love the sports stuff though. I really liked that she was like a sports agent, and so was the hero in this one, in competing companies. I thought that was interesting. The opening scene where they're in college was kind of awful to read about, but I'm sure that has happened to women in the past, especially when you're talking about frats and things that you have to do to get in your frat and things like this. It's just horrible. And there's lots of conversations about body image, so I think that is important to know going into this one as well. I just never connected to this romance at all. I'm so excited to read the third book because I think it's going to be tropes that work better for me. I think I might like the hero more than this one. So yeah, Kennedy Ryan, love you to death, but I can't get behind the cheating trope. And that is just me, that is a thing. And now I know firmly that that will never ever ever work for me, because if Kennedy Ryan can't do it in a way that I can root for the characters, nobody can. So that is off the table. It's not for me. But excited for the third one. I already have the audiobook downloaded, so hopefully we'll get to that in May. Who knows? We're in May already, and I'm having a great reading month now, so quite different than April. But let me know your thoughts on any of these. Obviously the highlights for me were Someone You Can Build a Nest In, and just for the summer, 2 books that are potentially on my top 10 books of 2024. I loved them both. So we had some really high highs and some low lows in April, but we're moving on, we're moving forward. So I can't wait to talk to you about my May reads and hear about the best book you read in April, the worst book you read in April, if you've read any of these and have thoughts on them, especially Block Shot, because it's so weird for me to have such a conflicting feelings about a Kennedy Ryan, because her writing is beautiful and amazing, and I think she builds really real characters. I just couldn't get behind the cheating trope. So I'd love to know how you felt about that one specifically. So thank you for your support as always. I'll talk to you all soon. Bye for now.